If you've ever purchased a home or are about to, then you know the importance of having a homeowner's insurance policy. But do you know exactly what it is that you're insured for? Stay tuned because you're about to find out more. By the end of this video, you will have a better understanding of the 6 primary pieces that make up a New York homeowner's insurance policy. We've also included a surprise special bonus one at the end. So let's get started. Number 1, the house. Sometimes you may see this listed as Coverage A, the dwelling, the residence, but it all means the same thing. And anything connected to it. So think an attached garage, a breezeway, a porch, or perhaps solar panels even. As long as it's connected to the house, it's part of Coverage A, the residence. This will also include things like the mechanicals, so your air conditioning, your heating system, your hot water heater, and all of the plumbing elements to the house will also be considered as part of the residence. The dollar amount you see on the coverage sheet is what the insurance company would provide to you in the event of a total loss, like a fire. Number 2, other buildings and structures. This can also be listed as Coverage B or related private structures. Either way, they all refer to the same sort of items. Those things include things like a detached garage, a shed, a barn, fences, patios, gazebos, docks, above-ground swimming pools. All of those items would be considered related or other private structures. Okay, on an insurance policy in New York State, you get a total of 10% of whatever the dwelling amount is that is applied toward your other structures. So that might not be enough money to cover things like a detached garage. So let's say you have a $200,000 valued insured house. So $200,000 was applied to the replacement cost for your home. All right, so now you have 10% of that amount for the other structures. That leaves you with $20,000. That might not be enough to, say, replace a 2-car detached garage. Might be enough for the shed, but perhaps not enough for some of the other things on the property. So if you have a fancy above-ground pool or perhaps a larger detached garage, maybe there's a mother-in-law suite above it, things like that, you're going to want to pay some special attention to that particular part of the insurance policy. You can add more here, but it only comes with 10% standard. Number 3, your stuff. Sometimes you'll see that listed on the policy as Coverage C or personal property. Basically, it's everything that you have that you own inside of the house. So things like furniture, appliances, clothing, housewares, decor, all of that would be considered personal property, all part of Coverage C. But there are some limitations here that you want to pay attention to. Certain high dollar, high value items are going to be covered with a little bit less than their actual replacement cost, or they're not going to necessarily be covered up to the limit that you might expect. So think of things like jewelry, fine arts, guns. Those things will all be set to a very low dollar amount. You'll want to look at your policy to see specifically how those items are covered and to what extent they're covered for. You can add them separately. You'll want to speak to your agent about that one and determine how to best insure those items. Now, regardless of what you have in the house, your coverage is determined again by a percentage of that Coverage A amount that you have on your dwelling. So where we mentioned before, where other structures has 10%, your personal property gets 50% of whatever your dwelling amount is. So using our same example from earlier, a $200,000 house is only going to have $100,000 in personal property coverage. Another very critical point here, on a standard New York State homeowners insurance policy, there is not replacement cost coverage granted to your personal items. That has to be changed by endorsement. So make sure that if you want replacement cost coverage for your personal items, that you speak with your agent and have that added on. Otherwise, all of your stuff is going to be depreciated down to about garage sale value before you receive any compensation after a loss. Number 4, money to live elsewhere, or you may see it listed as additional living expenses, Coverage D, or simply loss of use coverage. What this does is it applies 20% of the dwelling coverage as standard to a line item on the policy that will be there to compensate you for additional living expenses or travel costs to work, things like that, in the event that you are displaced from your home after a loss, let's say a fire. So a fire happens, unfortunately, it burns the house to the point where it is no longer livable. You have to live elsewhere. This is the part of the policy that is going to compensate you for doing so. Because remember, while you are displaced from your home, you still have to pay taxes on the property. If you have a mortgage, you're still having to make those mortgage payments. So while you're paying for those things, this part of the policy helps to offset the other costs that you have now incurred by having to live elsewhere. Number 5, your liability, or you may see it listed as coverage E or personal liability. Either way, this is the part of the policy that has nothing to do with any of the physical attributes on the home. This is what protects you in the event that someone who is not a resident of the home should become injured and decide that they want to sue you as a result of it. Your personal liability on the homeowner's policy is what comes in to cover attorney's fees, legal expenses, and any potential judgment that may arise out of the lawsuit. Now, a homeowner's policy in New York State will only start at $100,000 worth of coverage for personal liability on the home policy. You can add more. It is typically not very expensive, and in this day and age, $100,000 for legal fees and potential judgments probably isn't going to go very far. It's important to note here that as soon as that limit or that $100,000 is used up, the insurance carrier is no longer obligated to defend you. So if it gets used up, at that point, they are completely at their will to decide that they are no longer going to move forward with providing any further legal defense, leaving you on the hook for the balance. And number 6, don't sue me money. Okay, so it's not really called that. It's actually called medical payments or coverage F, but it should be called that, because this is the part of the policy that steps in the event that, say, somebody gets hurt at the house, but not to the extent where they want to bring you to court over it. So each policy for medical payments in the state of New York comes with $1,000 standard for your medical payments coverage. You can add up to usually about $5,000 total amount here for protection. It's worthwhile. A couple of times where it may come into play, let's say somebody comes over to the house, they pick up a glass or something like that, they cut their hand, they need 8 stitches now as a result of this accident. All right, so they have to head off to the urgent care or the emergency room. They receive the 8 stitches and then they have a bill as a result of it for, say, $2,200. All right, maybe you think it'd be better for you to pick up the expense on that since it happened at your house, but you don't want to pay for it out of pocket. That's when you can contact your insurance carrier, let them know what happened here, and they will step in and cover the cost for this accident. That is medical payments, and that's how that piece of the policy works. And now for that bonus piece I promised, and that is in-ground swimming pools. So, dependent upon who your insurance carrier is, you'll want to check to see how they covered in-ground swimming pool. Some carriers are going to include it in the coverage for the house. So that coverage A, dwelling, residence, that part of the policy, they'll wrap the cost or the coverage for the in-ground pool into that part. Should be okay if it's there, but many will include it in coverage B, which we said was only 10% of that coverage A dollar amount. So you may find with an in-ground pool, if something happens and the thing is completely destroyed, that you're not insured for as much money as you had hoped to fully replace the pool. So check your policy, be sure you know how the in-ground pool is covered. Well done. Now you have learned what the standard pieces of coverage are and what they mean on a New York State home policy. Be sure to watch our next video called What's Not Covered on a New York Home Policy, and be prepared for some surprises.